Welcome back to the Midlife by Design podcast. I'm your host, Lisai, and I am a human design teacher, mentor, and alignment coach, here to help you use human design to shed others' expectations and be who you came here to be in this midlife phase of your life's journey. In today's episode, we're talking with Dr. Peggy Malone, a chiropractor turned life coach who helps women over 40 into the magic of being a woman in midlife. She helps you to get curious and then gain clarity about where you want to go next with this one precious life, and then helps you incorporate adventure and play on your way to that reinvented version of you. In her playtime, Peggy plays basketball, practices back handsprings at, quote, old lady gymnastics, and goes on epic snowboarding adventures with her bearded hubby, John. She's based in London, Ontario, in Canada, where she and her husband love to throw parties, watch NFL football, and cuddle with their ragdoll cat, Amigo. Listen in each week to her podcast, the Midlife Improvement Project, as Dr. Peggy helps you increase self-awareness and build confidence as you discover what got you here and get clear about where you want to go next on the way to being an even better you. Today we talk about living life as a manifesting generator, the power of habits and why Peggy's design supports this, and stress, especially the stressors of midlife. I hope this episode empowers and inspires you. Welcome back to Midlife by Design. Today I have with me Peggy Malone. I am so excited to connect and to have her share her wisdom with you. Such a rock star and has her own pod. And I'm just going to give her a moment to introduce herself and then we'll get into some questions. So welcome, Peggy. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Lori, so much. Hello to all of my new friends who are listening to this pod. My name is Peggy Malone, and I am a longtime healthcare provider. I am a chiropractor turned life coach and podcaster. And my podcast is known as the Midlife Improvement Project. And I like to talk to women mostly about reinventing themselves in this vintage of life and deciding what they want to be when they grow up. And I'm very excited to make some midlife magic today with Lori.
Woohoo! I love it. So Peggy is a manifesting generator, and she definitely lives the manifesting generator life, just from what I know about her. So I wanted to ask you, though, when you learned that you were a manifesting generator, how did that actually resonate for you? And I'm curious how you think you're living your type and whether you feel like you're starting to own that man-gen-ness a little bit more as you move into midlife.
Okay. So I'll start by saying that human design is something that I'm still very much a beginner at. So sometimes I don't know all of the lingo. I've learned a lot of it from you, Lori. The one thing that I will say, though, is that the more I learn about it, I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense to me. I'm definitely multi-passionate. Like currently on my computer, there's 20 tabs open at least. So that's just a microcosm of my whole life.
I love
it. There's definitely lots of things that I'm interested in. The challenge for me, and I think maybe this happens with manifesting generators in general, is that I do a lot of opening tabs and then just leaving them open and not really completing the loops. So that's where some of my challenges are. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. Is this something a lot of the man-gens get into?
100%. And actually, I would this is a great place to kind of give you a little support because...
Yes, please. Yes, please. I'll take it.
Yeah, it's okay. Like manifesting generators need to let some balls drop. You're not meant to finish every single thing that you start. You know, with that creative life force energy that your sacral is giving you, you've got this energy that's popping off all the time and you get excited about something, and it's a little bit of that manifestor energy where it's initiating, I'm going to start it, but sometimes I'm not going to finish it. And so just giving yourself permission that it's all part of your process. And even if you don't finish something, you might come back to it years later, or you might never come back to it. Or maybe the gift in it for you was really just in the starting, and maybe the lesson that you were meant to bring or get from the experience is just in the starting of it. And it's really about not letting those tabs in your mind overwhelm you and make you feel guilty for not finishing them.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. And I receive all of this. Thank you.
Oh,
I
good.
think probably what midlife has allowed me to do, because you asked about how I'm showing up in this time of life as a manifesting generator, is without knowing what you just said. And now I feel much better about it. I have just let the balls drop, and I just decided to not feel bad about it. So that's happened a lot more at this time of life, which I think probably is this energy that, I don't know if this is just a manifesting generator thing or a woman who's over 40 thing, where we just kind of get to this place where we're like, yeah, and I'm just going to care less about that thing and focus on what's in front of me.
Right.
So I have less of that angst of trying to always close the loops, and the feeling bad as I'm trying to close the loops. I'm just like, I'm just not doing that thing.
Yeah, there's so much that generator.
I'm into it.
Yeah. That's excellent. So with the manifesting generator, I'm curious if you resonate with being called intense. I mean, my experience of mangens is that they do tend to be pretty intense people, but I'm curious if you've ever been called that or resonate with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I would guess in certain circumstances, like when I'm sporty, I'm intense. Like I played basketball when I was in university, and I still play what I call old lady basketball. And I still show up in a way that's intense. So there's that in certain situations, but I'm also kind of introverted. So maybe the intensity is only shared with certain humans.
Yeah.
So I haven't had a ton of experience where people say like, you're too much for me. So is that what you mean by intense? Like there's like this overbearing kind of thing, or is it just I'm focused when I'm focused?
That's more what I was thinking, is like this intensity that you bring to the table. I just noticed that about a lot of mangens is the way they approach things is intense, and everybody has their own personality, but it's just one thing that I'm curious about, and whether other people reflect that to you. So that's good to know about the basketball.
Yeah, well, there's that, and it's making me have some reflection about it. I guess maybe I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
I'm kind of lone wolfy, so I'm wondering if that's just I only interact with people that if I am intense, they're into it, they like it. Yeah. So it hasn't been reflected in a way that feels like somebody's not said to me, "Oh, that's really intense the way you're doing that."
I also think like your use of the word too much, I don't know, that always kind of makes me curl in on myself a little bit, because I feel like women in general are often told that we're too much if we're just simply emoting,
Emoting and existing. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I'm really reluctant to ask any woman to label herself as such when society already does that for us. Thank you very much. Okay.
I will say that if somebody was to mention to me out loud that I was too much, then you might see me get intense.
Oh my God. All right. I love it. And well deserved, right? Okay.
The one piece about manifesting generator, I just wanted to say that I do resonate with is being efficient and skipping steps. I always am looking for the way to get things done faster and more efficiently. And when I am anywhere in life and things are done inefficiently, my skin is crawling because I want it to be done in a certain way, because I'm like, don't they see all these gaps?
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is classic. Do you have any examples?
Well, an example that came to mind when I said that is that we were in a foreign country in the airport, and then the way that the line was set up, I was like, this is so wrong. Like if they just did this, this, and this, it would be fine. And then I'm frustrated because I don't have any control over it.
Oh, right.
So maybe this is where you can see the intensity too.
Yeah. The efficiency component is so true. And going back to that idea of having multiple tabs open and just many balls in the air, there's this underlying piece where you are always looking for efficiency. And sometimes that is why balls drop. Like you've got to just drop some in order to continue on and stay most efficient with what you wanted to accomplish. So I think too, there's some more kind of built-in permission for you to just let that go. But we need that from manifesting generators. We need the efficient ways to do things.
The other thing that just came to my mind about this is that just before we started recording, we were talking about editing podcasts. Right. So I think it's probably a good idea for me to have a visual podcast, similar to how you do, but I just haven't, because the most efficient way for me to get my podcast out to the world was to just have it as an audio. And if I get caught up in all of the things of making it visual as well, then I'm less likely to get to the finished product. So to be as efficient as possible, these are the kind of steps that I skip so that I can create the thing and ship it.
I love that. Yeah. Being able to actually get the thing done instead of bringing in other distractions. Yeah.
So that's an interesting just reflection I had right now. I'm like, oh, maybe that's why I do things in a certain way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love it. Okay, I wanted to talk about stress a little bit. I've been doing some work with a naturopath recently, and I don't consider myself to be stressed out. And some of the results that I'm getting back with my tests are like, maybe you're a little more stressed than you think you are. And I was like, wow, okay, your body tells the story, right? And so I also have a defined route like you do in human design, and yours is what I would call incredibly defined, where you have gates 58, 38, 54, 53, 52, 19, and 39 that are all defined. So basically that just means that all of those gates and the energies that are held within those gates are consistent within you. And the root center is this pressure center. So it pulses off and on, and it's pulsing to help you accomplish things, to get things done. And it feeds up into your sacral, and it feeds up into your spleen and into the emotional solar plexus. So it's giving you energy to do things, creative life force energy when it goes to the sacral. It's giving you energy to intuit and stay safe with the spleen. And then it's giving you energy for your emotions. And so I'm curious for you, how would you describe your relationship with stress? Like, how do you handle it? And maybe what have you learned about yourself in terms of handling stressful situations?
It's neat for me to hear you describe this like this, because the way that if I've had an acute stressor, and I've had some in the last few years, the way that I handle an acute stress is usually very well. Like it happens and I'm like, okay, now is my time. And I get hyper focused and I make a plan.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, that allows me to get through it very well and very effectively. And then when the acute stressor is over, I go straight into dissociation because I don't want to have to interact with the world for a long time afterward. Okay. So when I have a more diffuse overall stress, and I related this to having loops open, so I'm sure that there's different ways that you could help me to define it, but I do a lot of watching TV, scrolling, drinking alcohol, doing things that just put my brain in a place where I'm not in that intensity of maybe what you're describing as the defined route. I kind of try and escape from it sometimes. And then the acute stress shows up, or the thing that I need to be doing, and then I'm in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I'm in it, I don't feel need to be anywhere else.
Yeah. So I think that ability to be in it and not needing to be anywhere else, that's the beauty that you're gifted with this defined route. So the defined route gives you a consistent access to that energy, and it does pressure off and on, like I said. When you have an undefined route, then you actually take on and amplify all of the defined routes around you. And so you feel more pressure than a defined route would feel. And what I have noticed in my experience with working with people and doing chart readings is those people who do have a defined route tend to feel a little bit more grounded, like just naturally feel more grounded and have innate ways to deal with stress. And sometimes they can be hard to articulate because they are sort of like second nature. It's like your eye color. I don't think about, right? I don't think about having green eyes. It just is. So when we do have acute stressors, what I was hearing you talk about actually is reverting to another part of your chart, which we'll talk more about in a minute, but being a quad left, which is that hyper organized, almost like a control piece, but just I've got to make a plan. I mean, we all handle stress in different ways. I'm curious, do you have any practices? You said basketball. So what other types of movement do you do for your body?
So again, I'm on and off with it. And it's interesting because one of the questions that you gave me before we started recording was about habits and routines. And I help people a lot with their habits and routines. And generally speaking, as you probably would agree with, the thing I need help with is what I'm helping other people with. Mm-hmm. So I have a routine, but it's not an effective routine. So when it is effective, or at least the way I'm defining it, and I'm exercising regularly, like I love yoga. Let's give this as an example. I know that something like Pilates or weight training is effective. I find it boring, but effective. Yoga, I love. I feel like I'm in my body. I feel like it moves well. I feel like the whole thing is comfortable. I feel elated afterward. Mm-hmm. So I sort of try and do both, but because I know that there's benefit to the other, but I lean more towards like that feeling of yoga where it's like more movement that's less militant is the way I would describe it.
Yeah. Well, you have gate 52 in your chart, and that's the gate of stillness also in the root. And I find that people with gate 52 really do love yoga. It's such a lovely way to move your body, and practice being still. Because I mean, shavasana at the end, right? There's nothing better than that. But movement in general, I think, is super supportive for people who have defined roots, just as a way to kind of process some of that energy that's moving through there and pressuring you. Okay. So. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'd love to play basketball. I do also what I refer to as old lady gymnastics, and I go and I, flip around on various pieces of equipment, and yeah.
I love that. That's amazing.
I was a gymnast when I was a kid, and so I wanted to bring it back in this time in my life. And I turned 50 last July, and so before I turned 50, I wanted to get my round off back handspring back, and I hadn't done it in like decades. So last June, I didn't get it back on the floor, but on the tumble track, which is this like bouncy thing, I did a round off back handspring again. So I was very proud of myself. And this was one of the ways that I was sort of leaning into turning 50. It felt like this was an important milestone that I wanted to mark by doing something physical. Like there's something, and maybe this is related to my defined root.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, it's just supporting you in helping you to move forward in that, on that goal. But that is amazing. I love that idea. I love that idea of even just taking something from your childhood and like bringing it back,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really like that. I like that for the women that I work with when they're trying to decide what it is that you want to do with the rest of your life. Because there seems to be a lot of cultural, societal overlay from the time you're, a teenager until your kids leave the house, where you're like just checking boxes of here's what you're supposed to do. Right. And now's the time when you get to decide what you want to do. So sometimes that's like what lit you up and what were you excited about when you were a kid? Let's bring it back. So that's what I did.
Oh, I love it. I love that so much. That is super practical and just such a lovely approach. So let's get back to talking about those habits and routines. So I mentioned the quad left idea, and what I was talking about is at the top of your chart, those arrows that you have, all of them point left. And basically what that means is that you're designed to be organized, to be efficient, to follow routines, and that those types of things really tend to support you. How for you has it supported your midlife journey? And then how do you share that knowledge with women in midlife?
Well, I love this so much in the way that you've explained it, because in 2018, when I started the podcast, I started with a friend of mine and we started it and it was about habits and routines. So
Perfect.
it's neat that that's what we were drawn to. And I also felt like I needed more of it in my life, but I also am just interested in why people do the things they do. I'm always very curious to scratch the itch of why I am the way I am. So I think probably this is related to that.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, I do have a very routine life. I like being in the same space. I like having the same things to eat. My husband wants to eat something different all the time. I want to eat the same breakfast every day. I don't care if I eat the same thing for lunch every day. So I have his influence, and so I don't eat the same thing every day, but I would. I like the idea that this is something I can lean more into that will serve me, because I think that the routine I have now is not serving me as well as it needs to. So I will take that under advisement.
Remind me what your digestion is. Do you have it
On my chart, it is open.
open? Okay. So I was just thinking about how you were talking about enjoying one particular thing. And there's part of human design is your digestion. And there are specific digestions that like to do that. They really appreciate eating something almost like the entire day would be this one thing. It could be over and over and over again, and then they switch. But the open taste is really about tasting different things, and just taste in general is a component that's important for you. It can be interpreted a couple of different ways. Think about the taste, like the literal taste on your tongue. My teacher, Katie Irvine, talks about a friend of hers who has taste and will walk into a space and be like, like really getting a taste.
Like this room tastes a certain way?
Yes, you can.
Oh, that's cool.
Like a spidey sense. So it's something that you might experiment with,
Okay.
if you're just trying to suss out a space or something, is to just play around with that a little bit. And then there's the other kind of interpretation of the word taste, which is more about, oh, you have taste. You are very tasteful, or you appreciate things that are tastefully done or tastefully decorated or tastefully that sort of thing. It's almost like a design sense. I can see even just in your background, like it's very clear and organized and beautiful, and the colors are pretty. I think you probably do that intuitively. And plus also it's something that you could even develop it further. So also something good to.
I like that. And I love, like, by the way, I like to eat the same things, but I also am open to trying anything. And anytime we go anywhere, I'm always like, if anybody offers something, I'll try it, I'll taste it. I'm not picky about what, or I won't just say, no, I'm not going to try that. I love spicy things.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. And I know that one of the things you love to do is just adventure, right? Going out and doing new things. That's such a lovely combination to have both of those things. So the habits and routines that you have been able to establish for yourself are innately supported, I guess I would say. I'm curious where you find, like when people come to you to work with you, where do you find is there struggle with establishing these things? Like what kinds of roadblocks are women coming to you with?
Everybody comes with a different set of challenges, which,
Right.
obviously you've seen this even in this. Usually the way that I'll start with it is with what do they desire? Like, what are they looking for? And then we kind of like do an exercise around values, like what's important to them.
Yeah.
And then we make the container once we know those details. And the container is like, let's make the calendar, let's create the support and the accountability around the calendar. And then I think probably to answer the bigger version of your question, though, for women in general, especially coming into this time of life, their habits and routines are related to, I'm the hard drive that holds all of the information for every person that lives in my household, and they've all hijacked my brain to do all of the things. And so now my habits and routines that I create in this life are related to how do I make all of that work all the time? And it's kind of like the space where, and this is why I really like helping people to be able to like disconnect from that and create what do they want, what do they want, what do they desire, not just what do they have to do and what is next on the list and who has a dentist appointment and who's got lacrosse practice and like whatever, right? So generally speaking, when people come with all of the things that are the responsibilities of all of the other things, I really want to disconnect them from that for a second and then just get them excited about what they want to do. What do they desire? And then we can sort of build new habits right based on that, or a new direction based on that.
Yeah, I'm curious if you find, I know I do, that some women have a hard time finding that thing, like even reconnecting with that thing because so much of their brain space and being has been tied up in other people, right? And right? So
yeah.
do you
Well, yeah, like I have a client right now and she's got 3 little kids and she has this important, stressful job, let's call it. And she's then trying to figure out what she wants to do. And so we spent a whole call with her, like, and she went back to like, oh, she likes to do cross stitch. She likes to do crossword puzzles, like things that she hadn't thought about in a really long time. And then we gave her the homework, which is, I know you got like 25 million things on your list over here that you got to take care of for work and your family, but you got to take 45 minutes this week and let's focus on one of these things. So we just start like, or even 15 minutes, let's just do that. So we start with just little like tastes of things and then move from there.
I love that. Yeah, building sort of the on-ramp, right? And going back to your sort of this idea of your brain has been full of focusing on everybody else all the time. It's so when your kids like move out or when they're just getting older and you're less focused on keeping them alive, or those appointments or whatnot, it's like this big, all of a sudden, this supercomputer in your brain has like a big hole, right? It's like,
Yeah.
what do I fill that with? How do I even know? Yeah. Which is why I like to use human design to be like, okay, let's look at your energetics and see, who did you come here to be? Let's get back to that. So,
right. So, and by the way, this is part of the reason why I connected with you originally, because it's just one more beautiful tool in the toolbox of here's what scratches the itch of why I am the way I am, and how can I use that and like look through that lens to help me decide what I want to do next. So
yeah.
great.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of deciding, you are an emotional authority, which is at least half the population has an emotional authority. And essentially, as a reminder, what that means is you're designed to make decisions based on how do I feel, however, not in the moment. So taking time to let things unfold so that you can experience the highs and lows of what's called your emotional wave. So, you're allowing yourself to feel like super excited, and then you're also allowing yourself to come down off of that and not making the decision when you're in the heat of the moment, either the high or the low. So you have your emotional authority, solar plexus is defined. You also have that defined sacral, which is that creative life force. And then you also have the defined spleen, which is where we get our intuition and our safety. And that spleen is feeding directly into the sacral. So I'm curious if when you're making decisions, is there a component of operating on intuition and sort of intuitively sensing what's right for you along with maybe like a gut feeling? I'm just curious about, the mechanics of your chart and how it actually plays out in real life.
I would say that sometimes, and all of this, and you taught me some of this, which has helped me. I've always been frustrated with this, that when it's time to make a decision, I'm always like, and then it takes a long time for me to get to it. But then when it's time, it's a knowing. It's like this. So it's not based on pros and cons. It probably is sometimes because I'll bring logic in, but I have this very intense calmness that comes over top of me. And it's like, I feel more connected to the earth. And then I'm like, this is my knowing. This is what has to happen next. And sometimes it's extremely intense. And even if the people around me are buzzing, like, I don't know what to do, I'm like, this is the thing.
That gave me chills. I love that. That's such a beautiful description of your intuition at work. And I think for other people with a similar design, so if you are similar to Peggy, then you're either going to be a generator or a manifesting generator because you've got that sacral defined. But if you have all three of those centers across the bottom of your chart, the spleen, the sacral, and the emotional, then they're all playing a part in your decision-making process because you are going to feel some sort of intuitive hit, some way, shape, or form. Whether you're listening to it or not is, debatable. And then you're also going to get like that rush of in the moment, or that ka-thunk, that drop in the moment that tells you yes or no. And it's all sort of serving your emotional solar plexus to say like, hey, these are great things. Thank you so much for that information. And we're going to just give it a little more time to let things unfold, let more information come into your awareness and whatnot. So I'm curious so your emotional solar plexus as a manifesting generator is connected directly to your throat center, meaning that the mechanics of it are that the emotions come right out your mouth. So I'm curious if that actually happens for you, or like, can you relate to that sort of? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this another time. And I had that aha when we were talking about it, I've paid attention. So I'll be driving in the car and I'll be listening to a podcast, or I'll hear something, or I'll just have a thought. And it's like a thought or a piece of information that seems very relevant to my brain in the moment. And I'll go, ah, or like, aha, like right out loud. I'll have that aha right out loud, or it's very vocal. And so now when I do it, I notice because you told me that. And then I've also taken it a step further, and I've encouraged some of my clients to do this because it's been so helpful for me. And I just experiment to see if it's helpful for them, even if I don't know their chart. When they're having trouble making a decision or having trouble getting going on whatever needs to happen, I talk to myself right out loud. So if I was sitting in my office here and I didn't have you in front of me and I didn't have anybody else around, I'd be like, Peggy, I've noticed that you're procrastinating. What's going on? And I'll actually talk to myself right out loud, and it helps me to move into the next thing or to make a decision about what to do next.
Oh my God, I'm like celebrating you. That's amazing. So if like Peggy, you have a defined throat, do this thing because it is so helpful. The throat in human design is a manifestation center. It's essentially all of the energy in our body is traveling toward the throat in order for us to get it out into the world, which is how manifestation works when it comes to like human design. It's like you are manifesting all of this energy into form through your voice. And so using that tool is so beautiful. And what you were talking about earlier with the aha, like that's the sacral talking, which is a beautiful thing as well. Like giving those oohs and ahs and those funny sounds, allowing them to come out, right? Because it's just your sacral that wants to, give you information. And that's a beautiful thing. It's so helpful. So your decision making process, how has it unfolded over the course of your life? Because I can totally relate to this, have a lot of do it now energy in your chart. You have that sacral defined. You've got a really defined root. And so you've got plenty of capacity to jump right in the moment. And you also have an emotional authority, which says, hey, take your time, like let the decision sit. So I'm curious if there's been an evolution in your life around that.
I would say that it relates back to what we were talking about as I get older, learning to just let some balls drop and not having as much angst about them. So it used to be that I would jump into all the things all the time. And now if I have an excitement about something, I'll be like, okay, but really, I'll just give it a second before I decide to do it, which I relate to just taking more rest. But I also feel like I actually am more on to myself and realizing I don't have to do all the things.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, there's some wisdom, right? But if you happen to be a younger person listening to this and a manifesting generator, this is good to know, right? To know that you can have lots of go, do, but you don't have to, right? I love that. Okay, so I would love for you to tell us a little bit about where we can find you and what do you have cooking? How can women work with you?
Well, all roads lead to drpeggymalone.com, which is my website. You can find the podcast there, which is called the Midlife Improvement Project. And you can also find it wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm on Instagram most commonly of the socials. At Dr. Peggy Malone is my handle. Come and say hello. I would love that. And the thing that I've got cooking, as Laurie says, is I have a little mini course called Wake Up to Life 2.0. And it's just sort of like the beginning baby steps of helping you to move into that space of deciding, who do I want to be when I grow up, once you're in your midlife. So if that resonates with you at all, I would love it if you would come and check that out. It's drpeggymalone.com/wake up, all one word. And I'm sure that you'll put it in your show notes.
Yes, indeed. I will. I'll put all those links in the show notes. Excellent. Thank you so much, Peggy. It was so great to connect with you again.
Thanks for having me, as always.
Thank you so much for listening to today's Midlife by Design episode highlighting a generator. Hopefully, it has helped you to understand how this energy and aura works and how you can work with it, whether you're a generator yourself or you just have them in your life. Please remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts so more midlife mavens can find us. It is so super helpful. And if you want to understand even more about your own design, book a session with me. Link is in the show notes. And as I sign off, I'm wishing you the joy you deserve, the courage to let your baggage go, the determination to live out your purpose, and the clarity to be who you came here to be.